White.
Right now, American mix.
Uh, I guess white, but I.
Black.
Like the first person said white, but I'm like a mix of everything pretty much from German, Polish, and a bunch of other stuff.
Caucasian.
Black. African American. Because I don't want to say black, it's African American.
My race? I consider my race to be African American, although I'm racially mixed.
I would say Caucasian.
White, although I'm not really comfortable claiming that as race. I don't know. Feels like a loaded word.
Asian.
I guess white.
White.
I might consider my race to be African American or black, however you want to choose to associate it as.
White, I guess. I just think that people develop perceptions based upon race. I think you'd be naive to think anything else or believe anything else.
Given the struggles that have gone on in the name of race and how so much of our society is based on moving away from certain models of racial relationships, it would be impossible for race not to be a part of the social construct of the day and age.
Oh, what a big question.
Yeah.
It's identity, it's sense of self. People, and I teach, so the kids are constantly asking, do people choose to live in a certain neighborhood, or are people forced to, or do you want to, or should you want to? So there's still a lot of questions that people grapple with about race and identity.
Not as much as it used to.
Race always has a considerable amount of influence into all societies. I mean, it's like, of course, because especially now, because the minorities and the majorities, they're all fluctuating. They're always a possibility. Usually you see a white person, it's like, oh, you're a high-class society type person. You're either middle class or you're upper middle class, all that good stuff. Where it's like, you look at other classes where it's like, expected, like you think, whenever you think of someone who's Asian, you think of, oh, I'm the super smart person who has a doctorate's degree and everything. Whereas you don't necessarily give them a chance to just like open up and be whoever they want to be. But it's like, yeah, usually race has some influence on things.
Well, people look at you. The first thing they see is how you look. And if you don't blend in with what they're used to or like or are used to working with, they form an opinion. It only takes seconds.
Well, I think the point of the exhibition is that you're defined by your appearance by other people, right? That pretty much sums it up, I think.
I think the most glaring concern for me is the disparities in terms of academic achievement, poverty, and race. I think that there's a correlation between those three, and they cause a huge disparity in terms of how children are educated and how they're able to achieve academically.
Hard to quantify. And you see it in constant little interactions all throughout the day, some good, some bad. There's no giant, obvious sign saying this is a race issue.
Well, historically, I could not get an apartment in my own neighborhood where I grew up in Rhode Island because of my race, no question. I tested it, and it was absolutely the reason that I couldn't rent an apartment. That was back in the mid-60s. Okay? So that was one instance. Second, when I went for my first job out of college, I was interviewed by 9 people, and I was observed by 9 people before I was hired. I did not know, because I was a young college graduate, I did not know that was not the policy but that was what happened with me. They had to make sure that I was qualified before they would hire me. And so they screened me much more scrupulously than they would have anyone else who had been a European American.
In my life, I don't really consider race as a big factor. I'd much rather think of it as like just an identification. Me personally, I factor in more different things like the actual intelligence, intelligence of a person, the heart of a person, your characteristics. Factor in. I pretty much don't include color as a factor. So yeah.
I'd say it's a pretty important role in my life. Well, I'm a mixed race person. My father is white and my mother is Japanese. My mother grew up in California during the pre-World War II period, and she was put in the internment camps during World War II. I grew up in a small Midwestern town, and I was the only person of color. My two sisters and I were the only people of color in our school. I am married to a man who's Jewish, and I have mixed race children.
Not really.
Alright.
Not really, because I was raised in a family where even though we were in an unusual setting in terms of the racial dynamics in our community, our parents were very careful to make sure that we related to people as people and expected the same of those that related to us. And so that was a policy, whether it was because of race in terms of whatever dynamics were or not, that was the way we related, and that was our expectation, how we expected others to respond to us.
I grew up in a really multicultural area where I don't think people saw race as much in terms of friendship. And then as I grew up and I moved out here, it's a little more segregated, I feel, whether it's by choice or by just what it is. But I suppose that's the answer.
I was raised to be prejudiced
Yeah.
from my father.
It really hasn't, because East Liberty was a sort of a mix when I was coming up, so it really hasn't made any difference. And I'm going to school here, but I have relatives in the South. That was a wake-up call. But me personally, it hasn't affected too much.
I generally don't really take into consideration in terms of discussing or having conversation or considering them better or worse or whatever. Mostly they're just kind of humans and they're stuck in a situation maybe they didn't have any control over, maybe they had some control over, and like it was great or it sucks. Yeah, it doesn't really seem to matter to me all that much.